Hi, and welcome to Women in Philanthropy. This is a podcast about and by women working in philanthropic giving. Grantmakers, fundraisers, executive directors, researchers, advisors. You can't always see behind the scenes in philanthropic giving, and that means you can't see who enables this giving. My name is Michelle Fugel-Gartner. I'm a philanthropic practitioner and researcher. My doctoral research demonstrated that most of what we know about working in philanthropic giving is told to us through a male point of view. This podcast offers the opportunity to hear from women working in giving. The idea for a podcast was inspired by having dim sum with my friends and talking about our roles in philanthropy, our challenges, and our thoughts. Each 15-minute episode will connect you with a woman in philanthropy. You'll hear about her role, how she got there, and how it enables giving. You'll also hear her thoughts on issues such as worth, negotiation, and influence. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you are a woman working in philanthropy and would like to share your story, please get in touch. And now, our Woman in Philanthropy. The Women in Philanthropy podcast is generously sponsored by the Voluntary Sector Studies Network. VSSN promotes understanding of the UK voluntary sector through research and provides a voice and a meeting place for voluntary sector researchers in the UK. Membership is invited from academics and practitioners. For more information, look at the website www.vssn.org.uk. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Women in Philanthropy podcast. We're already on episode 6, and it's very exciting today. We have Veronica Bamford-Deane with us.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for inviting me along to episode 6. I'm very excited. It's a really good question. What is your role in philanthropy, to be honest? I ran another online platform, ticketing platform, called Tickets for Troops, and I work with 400 commercial partners across the UK.
Oh, wow.
So I had a very small team, a team of 4, but as I said, sort of had all these relationships with, big live entertainment, businesses, sports, music, theatre, kind of anything with a ticket. We probably had a relationship with, which was a really incredible opportunity to build those relationships across different sectors, and also see the different dynamics of how businesses, both big and small, work. And I think fundamentally, businesses driven by their commercials, because that's what makes the economy run, and also that's what makes a business successful. But at the core of the businesses that I was working for, they also, all of them, had a part where they wanted to do something good.
Okay.
And they wanted to contribute to society. And in that role, it happened to be through giving away free tickets. And in my current role, it's giving away a portion of sales. But I think what has been fortunate in particularly kind of the last 5 to 10 years and sort of even more sort of increasingly in the last couple of years is there's a real shift in the expectation of businesses to do better for their sort of customers and clients, but also for their employees as well. And there's a real kind of innate drive to, it's not a tick box exercise anymore. Perhaps for some businesses it is, but actually that question mark, which I know sometimes comes up, is, is it just, is it greenwashing, or is it just a tick box exercise? Or actually, should we approach it from a different angle? And if a business is successful, should we be welcoming any good that they can do and any opportunity that they can do to contribute to society or the environment?
That's great. I have so many questions just based off what you've just said. But okay, I'm going to take the first one. And so I'm really curious. So how did you end up working on sort of the business side? Was this like a track you had in university or was this a combination that you've always had, or how did that happen?
No, it's very unconventional. I think my kind of career to date has been very unconventional, really. My love of charity and working for cause started back at school,
Okay.
And then went into university and studied sociology there and was part of the Raising and Giving, the RAG Society, did that for 3 years. It was one of the best things I've ever done. And then went on to wanting to work for a charity. But actually the role I was just describing at the military charity, I got from basically sending a speculative email to them a few years before asking for an internship, managed to get that internship with them, moved on to another charity afterwards, Save the Children, working with their fundraising teams as well. And then this role came up to run the charity a couple of years later. So no, kind of you saying, oh, did you have that corporate partnership drive or the drive to work with businesses? And actually, if you came and asked me, oh, are you only good at corporate partnerships? Funny enough, I'd automatically probably say, well, no, I'm not trained in doing that. And that's the truth. I'm not trained in doing it. Everything I've done is sort of from learning on the job.
Yeah.
But actually, when I reflect, I'm like, oh, actually, we did hold 400 commercial partners and most of those we brought in from scratch. So yes, of course they are corporate partnerships, but perhaps from a very sort of fundraising official, it's not the traditional corporate partnership. But okay. I think maybe, I don't know, move on to talking about that a bit later. I think that's one of the things I've learned a lot is process doesn't have to be in a traditional sense to make something work. And I think having that flexibility of doing things in a slightly different way, perhaps a little unconventionally, but if it works, it works. So keep it going.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Okay. So I want to know a bit more about how you see this role enabling giving. And I think that question builds off nicely from what is what might have been the conventional approach to approaching corporations? And I also wonder if this ties into what you were starting to talk about, where corporations are finding this drive to be involved in the social sector or in social issues. So I'm curious about how would you describe as it enables giving? And then if there's contrasts against what it was traditionally or conventionally, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, of course. I think kind of, corporate partnerships in the conventional sense, you go to one of the big top 100 and you approach them and hope that their employees will take part in some challenge events, and hopefully, you might be able to build a more strategic partnership out of that. But there are requirements for charities to have sort of minimum thresholds and commitments with the business as well. And perhaps they want a Charity of the Year partnership. Perhaps they want one cause-related marketing. Once they want 3 different challenges and a nice photo at the end. And I'm not playing it down at all. But there are, I think, so many other ways of working with, and I'm going to use the word businesses here, that probably aren't explored. So one of my slight pet peeves is the majority of businesses in the UK are SMEs. There are 5.6 million of them. And there are only 7,500 corporates. That's businesses over 250.
Yeah.
So why do we, as a kind of a sector, just go after the big ones when we've got question. All this huge opportunity? And I think there is a real issue with the word corporate and the word business. And actually, if we looked at businesses or business owners as sort of, you and I, really, it is you and I, rather than corporates, I think that would provide a bit more accessibility.
And do you think, so how have you approached it then in that regard? Like, how do you feel your role is in talking to business owners? Like, what is how do you, or I don't even want to say the word convince, how do you interact to build that relationship whereby they feel like they have agency and they can give and they want to do it in maybe a non-traditional way?
I think just talking to them like people.
It sounds so simple.
It does sound really simple, but I think building a genuine relationship with them and working out exactly what they want to achieve, and also, depending on the different roles I've had, what we're trying to achieve as well, and see if we can find a point where we can collaborate together, and does it work well for both sides? Because, you can push something as much as possible to a business or an individual if we're just talking about it. But if it actually doesn't work for them, then, you're, as you say, that awful expression, but pushing water up a hill.
Yeah.
But I think just building relationship with a person, finding out about their business, what their values are, what they're trying to achieve, and how together as a sort of a philanthropy advisor, you can support them in whatever sort of agency you're functioning in.
So just kind of building on from that, do you see any trends right now? I mean, obviously we talked about sort of the negative idea of social washing or greenwashing, but for business owners, what are their main drivers, or what are there any trends that you're seeing or desires that they hold that then you feel like, oh, great, this is where we can start the partnership from.
Yeah, one of the great things we've had at Work for Good is really looking at kind of cause-related marketing and certain sales fundraising. But I think kind of you almost put that aside as a mechanism, but it's looking at sustainable ways for businesses to support, because as a business grows, they go through all the different bumps in a road. And if you have committed a certain amount by the end of the year and actually your forecasts are really end up really down and you're not in profit, then you're not going to be able to support the charity you want. So kind of cause-related marketing, that's giving through sales, is a very sustainable way, because for a business to progress, you have to sell. And therefore, if you sell, you'll be able to make a donation. So I think actually it's about finding very simple ways for businesses to contribute through finance or contribute through volunteering or whatever, or skills sharing, whatever it is that the either the not-for-profit or charity wants to get from them for the partnership. But finding them in ways that are very accessible, that are easy to do, and also effective for both sides. So as I say, so it is a collaboration. It's not just a one-sided partnership.
Right. Thanks for explaining that. It's interesting because when I used to work a little bit in social enterprise, there was just this sense that like you really need to make sure whatever offering it is, it's just really deeply ingrained in the operation model, that it's not some far-flung idea that's very hard to then incorporate. And so your examples of, make it simple, make it really authentic to what the business is already doing, make it easy to continue, I think really resonates. Okay, we've already raised some really good issues, but I want to know from your point of view, what issue in philanthropy needs airing?
Something I've actually not really touched on a little bit before, it's spoken about collaboration. So it's a little bit controversial, but last year I sat on a webinar, and it was run by an organisation, and they basically said, business for good, social enterprise are competition. And actually, I know. Nice reaction. Yeah, I know. Well, that was my reaction. I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting. Let's continue. Let's watch this." But what was coming out was, rather than seeing it as an opportunity for collaboration or an opportunity to perhaps reduce the need that we currently have in society and the environment, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have any charities or charitable need. But we do. So, how do we reduce that, and how do we do it together in the most efficient and effective way? But it was the first time I had, I suppose, had my mind open to the negative approach from kind of inside the charity sector, seeing it as the competition. And I understand that to an extent. It's the same as you look at lots of charities in exactly the same sector, and you're all competing for the same funding,
right?
Unless, for example, an individual or a business has been immediately supported by that charity or the cause, it's likely that you're sort of going after the same funding pots. Now, there are some sectors that are very good at actually working very collaboratively, like the Hospice UK network is very, very good, mainly because obviously those who use hospices are using the ones very close to home. So there isn't actually that competition. But I think it would be really good to see how, or perhaps for a community sector like them, to see how they could share those learnings with some of the other ones. But equally for charities to have, and this going back to your first question, is what is an issue, but have those conversations with social enterprises and have those conversations with tech for good organizations or business for good organizations to be like, why are you doing this? And I think if that is a question of why or how can we work with you to make this better? And that's something we have been, very fortunate about, building relationships with hundreds and hundreds of charities who have seen the benefits of working with a business for good like ours is, but they can see how we can help progress their objectives and their aims.
I think it's really important because, so I also ran into this issue, again, working in social enterprise. And in that case, it was competition between SMEs and social enterprises specifically. Yep. But what I think this draws out is that there is that spectrum now of this blended idea of, okay, this is pure charity or pure philanthropy all the way to, peer for profit. And then you have all this gray area, all this spectrum of these types of organizations and these missions of organizations that are looking to do social good. And so, yes, that looks like a beautiful spectrum when we see it on whole. But as you point out, it's a little bit more chunky. I don't know how to say it. There's a little bit more tension. It's a little bit more complex. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a little bit more complex when you get down to who's doing what and how do they work together in order, or do they work together? So I guess in this regard, because I'm really glad you raised it, what is your take on how it's going in terms of, do you see these conversations progressing for collaboration, or do you think we're just starting to kind of pick at the real issues?
I think it's a glass half full approach, but I think I do think it's getting better. I really do. And in the 12 or so years I've been in the charity sector, I do see doors being opened and more expressions of interest and the collaboration. And I think it probably also helps from that drive from business and society and the expectation from consumers and individuals for businesses to do a lot better. And I think, the awful word trend, but when something is on trend, it really helps. And, charities they do the most incredible jobs and they still get bashed. They get bashed for getting paid, or they get bashed for one tiny, I don't know, issue or challenge or contretemps that have happened, and then it gets splashed all over the media, and then all charities' reputation go down the pan. And that's unacceptable, really, for the work that they do. The more individuals, the more businesses who want to make our world a better place, excuse the very overall cliche, but that's at the end of the day, if we can all be a little bit kinder to each other, collaborative, and willing to try and find better outcomes, then we're going to have a lot more progress. And I think this business for good, whether it's B Corp, or whether it's the Better Business Act, or whether it's, people standing outside Parliament and putting their foot down.
Yeah.
I think that movement and movements are becoming more prolific and making a bit more of an impact. So people using their voices and their platforms, and, with social media, we're in this fortunate and unfortunate position, but fortunate position where awareness can be raised very, very quickly.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I'm just on board with you. It's just, there's a movement around this. It is very exciting. There's a lot of opportunity, and it's not to lose sight of where the tension points are, but continuing to learn from them. And thanks for bringing that one up. Okay. This is my rapid fire section.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to start and ask you, do you have a favorite worst? I don't know. A worst philanthropic jargon?
I was having a little think about this, and I was finding it really, really difficult. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just don't find any words.
You love all the jargon.
I just love the jargon. There was a couple of thoughts. This is not quick fire, but I was thinking about the difference between supporter and donor. Some organizations will just talk about their supporters, and only when a supporter starts giving a lot of money, they become a donor.
Yeah.
So, surely a donor and a supporter are exactly the same, however you do it. So maybe we have some consistency there.
Yeah.
And then on that note, it's more not really like a jibe, but I just think it's funny, calling someone a high value giver. And that was that's where I started back at.
What's a high value giver?
There we go. So, well, depending on the charity, it will be depending on the amount that an individual is giving.
Okay. So a major donor or something like that?
Well, it's, exactly. In between. So you've got individual givers, high value givers, and then major donors. So it's kind of that interim sector who may or may not make it into the major donors, but they're probably giving a bit more than £1,000 a year or something.
Okay. But, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's
all right.
Not really a gripe, but
no, it's good. It's something new for me. All right. So then we'll go to the other side. What would you say the most inspiring trend or person or program or anything? What inspires you right now?
This is absolutely nothing to do with kind of partnerships, corporate funding or fundraising, but it is to do with relationships. I actually think challenge events are still such a inspiring way of raising money and raising awareness. I know. So
say what a challenge event is.
So a challenge event, whether that's a sports event, sort of a running a marathon, or doing a hike, or climbing a mountain, or doing a skydive.
Yep.
And I know they've been in the sector for years and years and years. And also with COVID, they were unfortunately decimated.
Yeah.
But I just think like they will always remain, and perhaps they'll be fluctuating in terms of their success for charities, but to enable supporters to do their hobbies and their interests, or perhaps try and start doing a hobby or interest. So not everyone likes to run a half marathon.
Yeah.
But I think that's incredible to be able to have a fundraiser on the side of that. And I know, challenge events are also slated quite a lot. I just think it's a really great opportunity, and it's one we should continue to support and encourage others to do.
I love how it provides agency to individual people to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just had the London Marathon, and it runs right through my neighborhood. So we always do a big fanfare, and it's so heartwarming to see how many people are out there running for charities. Yeah. And like you said, these challenge events really, I think they still speak to the masses. So thanks for bringing that up. That's great. Nobody's mentioned that. So, all right. So this is the final question. What do you think the next needed role in philanthropy is?
Now, this, Michelle, was something that we spoke about recently, but I think, and I don't know what the role is or the title is, because I think titles are one thing, and actually the implementation is the real thing that's important. But aside from that, I think some type of advisors to impact investing, but with the need for that long-term effectiveness of patient capital. And I think there is still little probably evidence, or maybe not evidence, there's little willingness to take more risks. But I think, one of the really interesting examples was, over COVID, and we had to get everyone off the streets because they needed to be protected. And so suddenly hotels were open up and shelters. Right. And then post-pandemic, everyone was popped back out on the streets. Now, and I know there was so many different, so many things going on, and as a society, we can't get absolutely everything right. But had there been some group working on the long-term strategic impact of really investing in the homeless community, right, would we have as severe a problem as we do now? And I think that is something that is just, it's just really, sorry to bring the mood down, but I think it's something really sad. And now it's just getting so much worse with the cost of living crisis. But had we tried to tackle that at that point over the last couple of years, perhaps we'd be in a better situation. So maybe it's a impact patient capital advisor.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay. So bringing financial minds or financial resources, let's say, bringing financial resources into the social sector for but long-term investment, to actually change the dynamic in the situation.
Yeah, exactly. But I think also with the realization, it's like when you're fundraising, you can put a 3 to 5 year strategy together and a forecast. Right. But you throw in a pandemic and a cost of living crisis and a war, I'm sorry, but that goes out the window, and all investors know it. Yeah. So an investor will look at your deck and they'll say, okay, well, you're not going to reach that in you're going to need twice the amount of time and twice the amount of capital. So why don't we just start with the honesty? And this comes back to your first question: how do you speak to businesses? Honestly. Right. You speak honestly. You've got to speak to the best of your abilities, and you've got to talk up whatever you are trying to put in front of them. Yeah. But if you're speaking with integrity and transparency and honesty, and you really believe in the mission that you're trying to achieve, then there's absolutely no reason why together you can't come to some kind of agreement.
Oh, I love it. I thank you so much for today, for bringing together this idea of how we're all in it for social impact. And it's just that we have different positionalities, being it business or corporate or fundraisers and charities, advisors on the outside. There's this opportunity to really have collaboration. So thank you for bridging all of that today. For anyone who's looking to learn more about what Veronica is up to, there are links in the pod sheet and in the description of this podcast. And I'm going to ask Veronica to share some of her favorite resources with us to include in the pod sheet as well. But thank you all for being here. Thank you, for Veronica, for your time today. And we look forward to having everybody here again soon. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. As well, check out all the links and the resources in the show notes. If you are a woman in philanthropy and would like to share your story, please get in touch. That's all for this episode. See you next time.